So, hello and welcome to this interview with Alice Harrison, one of our artists presently on display at Alpha Art Gallery's current exhibition, Mirror to the World. My name is Katie Perrin, and together we will be going over some of Harrison's artistic process, as well as the pieces that were graciously contributed to both our physical and online presentations. We're going to start off pretty simple today. Alice, how are you today?
Doing just great, thank you.
That's great to hear. We're so excited to have this opportunity to talk about your artwork in more depth. So first, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from and where do you live now? And how did you initially get into art and begin your career as an artist?
I'm born in New York City, and I've lived actually in New Jersey more than the years I lived in New York. Think of myself as a New Yorker, though. I've lived in Bergen County, Sussex County, and now I'm in Morris County in Morristown, New Jersey, which is a great city. And how I became an artist, I think I've always done art. When I was in second grade, I would be excused from class to be able to do still life artwork with a friend of mine, and we would spend a period of time just drawing. So I've always done art. I had lessons as a child. In fact, my mother tells me that my father gave up lunch so he would have the money I would have art lessons. I did not attend art school deliberately. I was an English major and a government minor, but I have studied with people that have been of import to me, and through the years have studied with various people.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And I definitely want to talk about that more later when we discuss like your practice and how your background influenced your work. But first, to pivot a little bit, what is the inspiration behind the selection of your mixed media collages on display in Mirror to the World?
Well, they were all done during the period in the midst of COVID. And I work on canvas, I work on paper, I work on three-dimensional, I do books. But this whole group was done in a sketchbooks. One sketchbook is 8x8, the other sketchbook is 9x12. And I paint in oil, acrylic, watercolor, etc. But most of these are strictly collage, using some papers that I had printed or hand painted as well.
That's really cool, and something that is so important to see in our show. The medium of collage is, very, very it's all about layers and textures, and that's something that I've noticed in your work, you really explore, especially when you talk about combining items with a former life with new materials. But before we get ahead to that sort of discussion, why do you choose to work with different artistic media, and more specifically with collage? And how does creating multimedia art relate to your overall aesthetic practice and the messaging in your work?
Well, I like diversity, period. People, things, and I love putting things together, people together, and love putting things together that you would think don't go together, and somehow or other try to make it work. So that's how collage enters into my practice.
Yes, and you mentioned, like I said previously, your fascination with bookmaking and your experience working with materials you've collected, combining items with a former life with new materials. How do you think this has shaped your current practice, and what is an approach or some approaches you take in your practice?
It's totally intuitive. So, except for a few minor exceptions, before I start working, I have no idea where I'm going. As to, you mentioned that the bookmaking, I went to a flea market with a young friend of mine, and I saw on a table a toaster from the 1930s, and I looked at it and I said, book. And I don't know where that came from. And I have created a book out of a 1930s toaster. Actually, there are two books in it. and the piece itself is a book. Or I saw vines in a store that were circular. I'm not sure what they were used for, napkin holders, and I bought a series of those and made books of various cities like New York City, London, Paris. Not sure where all that comes from, but I just get inspired by what I see.
And in your artist statement, you mentioned that you work in layers to technically, intellectually, and spiritually create images and sensations of color, harmony, and joy, and that your art is inspired by your own personal distillation of the external world. And in your works on display in Mirror to the World, what are some central themes or subject matters that you explore?
In hindsight, it was not in foresight. It's optimism, and hopefully to get out of this mire of COVID. And I tried to make it positive. Again, it totally intuitive. I wish I could give an example and say I visualized exactly what I was going to do, but I have no idea. The work speaks to me.
I'm really intrigued by the juxtaposition of train tracks and train imagery with abstract shapes and butterflies in your piece entitled On the Right Track. What is your motivation behind creating this piece, and what is the story behind this piece?
Well, the practical story is pieces of it had been in a piece of artwork that was a commercial endeavor that I had done designing. And I tore it up and wanted to make it into a piece of fine art. As I was working, I used the images of the tracks of the train. The socks with the butterflies were from another source. There was some hand-painted papers that I tore. Some things were cut. And when I finished the piece, I saw that it was on the way to a better life without COVID. And the butterfly on the socks were representing beauty and positivity.
I love that. And to talk a little bit more about some of your other works in the show, I noticed that both your works, Half Moon and I'll Chase the Moon, feature the moon in their titles. What is your motivation behind creating and naming these pieces, and what story do these works tell?
Well, I'll Chase the Moon actually was a piece of music. It's a song. So it's sort of I'll chase the moon and look for you wherever you are. And Half Moon, it's the moon rises above the clouds below, because there's an image of clouds that were hand painted below.
Yeah, that's something I saw that within like the abstract piece. And to discuss another one of your works, Fractured Urn, which is on display in this exhibition. What is the motivation and symbolism behind the objects you chose to include in the painting?
Again, it was totally intuitive. When I finished it, it looked like a fractured urn and reminded me of a poem by Leonard Cohen, the musician from Canada. And he said that there's always, I don't remember the exact quote, I have it written down somewhere. There is always a crack to let the light in. And I thought that was beautiful. So the fractured urn is something that could be negative, but it's letting the light in. And in that piece, there are found papers and also papers that I've hand printed.
I love that. And I think that the fractured urn also, I think it has a lot of symbolic significance, like within like the history of art. And to talk about like a different piece about you in the show, one of my personal favorites is your piece Soon. And I really love the interplay of different colors and textures in this piece, and would love to know the inspiration and story behind it. What did you intend to convey through this piece, and what is the symbolic significance of its iconography?
Well, soon was soon to be better, but this is a piece, like many of my pieces, had several lives. It started as a drawing in very bold colors in acrylic markers, and it just seemed very harsh to me. So I kept layering and softening it and layering, and put the polka dots and put semi-transparent layers of white on it to give it a softness. And so there's a lot of depth to that piece and many layers.
Yeah, I love that. And now I want to pivot to talking a little bit more about your general artistic practice. And the major question that I had was, what is the significance behind your choice to experiment with abstraction in your works?
I started as a very traditional artist. I studied with someone who taught all the basics, only great masters, and I did strictly traditional work. And it was fine, but there was something missing. I felt I needed more depth and more meaning, and I felt abstraction would give that to me. So I went to the Art Students League in New York and was going to study with Leo Manso, an instructor, but he was on leave, and I studied with Jerry Samuels, who was an abstract painter, and I had a wonderful experience doing that. And then when Leo Manso returned, he introduced collage in my as a suggestion, and from then on I became a collage artist, and that goes back to the 80s.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much. That's really provides like really interesting background on your practice. And now, of all your works, which is your favorite, or which do you have a particular attachment to? And if you don't have one, which piece would you like to talk a little bit more about, or bring more information to?
I have no favorites. I just, here and there through the years, there are pieces that I don't want to sell, and I hold on to them. But generally, there are times when I said, I just want to work in my studio, have a tunnel outside my door where I can just toss my work and not have to store it, and somebody will take it, and I can just keep working, because it is the process that I love. And I know there were a piece or two that we did not talk about, and I think Turning a New Leaf is one of them, which incorporates more paint than the others do. And that too is another one, like Soon, that has many, many layers and many lives. And part of the reason I titled it Turning a New Leaf is because I kept turning a new leaf and changing it. And it evolved into a statement about the earth and climate change.
All right, thank you. That's really interesting. And I don't have any more questions for you, but if there's anything else you'd like to add, or anything else you might have thought of during our interview, anything you're working on now, any shows you're going to be in soon, or any lingering thoughts, please feel free to share.
I have a quote from August Wilson, but before that, I've periodically through the years done collaborative work. I did, and particularly with a fellow artist, Judy Lyon Schneider, and we created an assemblages called The Bag Ladies, and it was about the stages and states of women who came of age at the cusp of the women's movement. And that was one project. And when we've worked on individual projects, we just did one about diversity that we just finished. And previous to that, last year during COVID, I went and worked in her studio and we did a book called To Life. And we said, we're still here, we're still working, we're still enjoying life, we're celebrating. And it's about aging, women and aging. And this, I don't know if, everything seems to take longer. Our get up and go has got up and slowed, from more working out to more time out, nap breaks, et cetera, et cetera. And it's an accordion book, which I like because you can turn it page by page or open it up and you have a whole panorama. And we're working on a new project in a few months based on friendship, and we'll see where that goes. So collaborating has been an interesting thing for me as well.
Thank you. That's really cool. Thank you for sharing the book. And where can people find more information about you or this?
My website, AliceNHarrison.com.
Okay. Well, once again, thank you so much for speaking with us all today and sharing insight into your creations.
Thank you.
On behalf of Alpha Art Gallery, I would like to take a minute to thank our sponsors, including Amboy Bank, Magyar Bank, Johnson & Johnson, New Brunswick City Center, Middlesex County Cultural and Heritage Commission, Bristol-Myers Squibb, and Pfizer Inc. Alpha Art is confident that all who come to our 2021 shows will leave with a greater appreciation of the arts and the gallery showcasing of a variety of artists.